On behalf of the Texas Zeta chapter of Pi Kappa Delta, located in the province of Lower Mississippi, I'd like to thank the audience for tuning in to this parliamentary debate hosted by TCU that we hope is going to create some great clash. I'd also like to thank the opposition for being here today and my partner for helping me through this debate. The political world we're seeing today is much more heated and contested than the way it started and probably the way it was meant to be. And this brings us to the resolution today, which is pointing fingers, calling names, and learning lessons. The tone of political discourse has uniquely shaped the current campaign season. And we want to run this as a fact case and focus on why the tone of these political campaigns have shaped the campaign season in a positive aspect for the voters. And we also want to focus on the word uniquely. The government is going to present its case in 4 contentions. Contention number 1 is that the tone presented in today's campaigns brings accountability to the candidates. Candidates can no longer go back on what they say or come up with new arguments because everyone has access to the internet. Everyone has records at their fingertips within a second or a click of a mouse. And we see people taking accountability more for their actions because of this heated clash between politicians. If you look at the passage of health care within the past 4 years, after that was pushed through Congress and signed by the president, people came out in droves to the polls and made their candidates accountable for voting on something they didn't want. The Americans voiced their opinion, the politicians didn't listen to them, and they were held accountable for what they did in Congress. Contention number 2 is that it creates heated debates that bring forth more contested issues than if we were in kind of a passive tone of a political debate. You see people change, like Gingrich, who tried to run a passive debate and was somewhat forced into an aggressive debate because of the fact that everyone else was bringing up these important issues that people weren't focusing on. If you run a passive debate, then nothing that's contested is going to be brought up by anyone. So it has uniquely shaped this in the fact that people have become more contested, more heated, and it has definitely changed the campaign season for the better. Contention number 3 is it gets people interested in the debates. If you look at the debate held between Obama and Romney last night, Twitter was exploding with people interested in their comments and their contentions. We really haven't seen an outcome like this in a couple of campaign seasons simply because people have been passive. Politicians have been passive and not really bringing up the issues that people want to hear. But if the politicians step out, make a new case, state a new way to do things, and come out swinging and pointing fingers and calling names, then you see people respond either negatively or positively, but they're still responding to something they haven't responded to before. So we see the droves of people are becoming more involved in politics, which is a good thing for the United States. And our 4th contention is that it shows personality to people running our country. Everywhere you go today, there's a video camera, a microphone, someone taking a picture. Everyone has a phone in their pocket that has a high-resolution camera. You can't get away from the media today. You see this in John Edwards' campaign 4 years ago. He tried to run a relatively passive campaign. People attacked him. Other politicians attacked him. You have him fixing his hair in front of a mirror for 45 minutes instead of working on a debate or working on some kind of issue that would be important to the people of this country. And he was also accused of, having affairs and not focusing on the values that Americans pride themselves on. And turns out it ended up being true. So, using these contentions, we feel that the tone of political discourse has uniquely shaped the current campaign season in a positive aspect for the voters in the United States as a whole, because it brings accountability to the candidates, creates heated debates that bring up unique and contested issues, gets people interested in politics and brings more people to the polls, and shows personality for people that are going to eventually be running this country. Thank you.
I would just like to offer my great thanks to the witnesses of this debate, and for my opponents for an excellent clash, for my partner for a great aid, and for the Speaker of the House, as well as just the opportunity to represent the Texas State chapter of Pi Kappa Delta of the Providence of Lower Mississippi here on this great campus at TCU. The opposition offered several claims and several contentions that I would just like to run through before I launch my own case. They, in the resolution stated, they said that which I'd just like to repeat real quick just for clarity, that pointing fingers, calling names, and learning lessons had created a unique political discourse in this current election season. In that, they said that the uniqueness allowed for the uniqueness of the political name calling, and the discourse did four things. That it brought accountability because everyone has access through the web and internet sources, that it creates heated debates, which I have to agree with, and that it makes people interested with the issues that people want to hear about, as well as that it shows the personality of the campaigners. The first thing I'd like to say is that the tone of this political discourse brings accountability. In that, I have to disagree. The tone of this does not bring accountability. If anything, it creates a detrimental effect to the political discourse that people are not having. We remember, as citizens and viewers of this debate, we remember the ad hominem attacks. We remember the issues that are brought up on the front pages of websites and of newspapers. We see these things. It might bring accountability in the fact that, like, we hear that one phrase, but not necessarily the actual discourse. The other thing is that you still have a silent majority of people in the United States who are not informed of the actual issues that the United States public needs to know about and that political candidates are actually basing their platform on. We hear about issues of hair fixing and of scandals regarding sexual affairs based on candidates and other issues like that, but not necessarily what they're running for. Yes, I can take that.
Would you like a president who had a good campaign but cheated on his wife and fixed his hair for 45 minutes?
Personally, I don't know if that's my place to make a regard, but I would just like to go back to the resolution in which it states that this has uniquely shaped, that the political discourse this season has uniquely shaped political discourse in the country in a positive way. And I'll go through and just say why I believe it's done in a detrimental way. Also, this political discourse, the opposition argued that it makes people interested in the issues that people want to hear about. 60 million viewers were estimated for the political debate last night. Twitter and Facebook were exploding. But what were the issues that were covered? What were the actual political discourse that resulted in those things? Was it substantive? Was it based on how they looked? Based on the ties? Based on the backdrop of the stage? What was it about? Also, that this political discourse in this season, the opposition argued that it shows personality, that you can't escape the media. But that will lead really well into my layout. I'm just saying that this does show personality of the candidates, but it doesn't create discourse on political issues that we're going to cast our votes on. In that case, I'd like to run through my issues regarding that, stating that this political season has not uniquely shaped political discourse, and that it has actually been a detriment and not a positive thing. So starting with this quote from a actual political candidate, that this person was the son of a half-breed Indian squaw, sired by a virgin mulatto father. Of course that's going to make headlines, but not the current headlines. This was actually done in the 1800 election debate, in which this quotation was launched at Thomas Jefferson, who made a similar claim, and it might sound quite similar in the fact that the current president, President Obama, is still facing critics' claims based on his nationality. That we need, that the Tea Party is continuing to launch claims regarding his line of birth and legitimacy in office based on his nationality. This campaign season has been ugly in the fact that we see ad hominem attacks, we see mudslinging in the furthest regard, but it's hardly new. My first contention, and I'll preview these real quick, that this is hardly new to the political discourse based on history and as well as the current situation. Also, the negative campaigning is detrimental to the American political system. And thirdly, that more information and technology does not equal uniqueness. My first main point is looking at the 1800 election of this country, in that you see ad hominem attacks in full force. This is one of the greatest examples of mudslinging that our country has seen. It was based on a bipartisan, highly contested bipartisan system in which both parties had, in their opinion, everything to gain and everything to lose. They needed, in their mind, to win, and in this, this resulted in virulent and volatile attacks on the campaigners. Also, the election in 1828, in which Jackson was campaigning again, there's a very famous coffin handbill that was put out that attacked Jackson regarding his legitimacy in office and what his military prowess had been regarding actual deaths. In this, there's actually another quotation. Yes, I can take your question.
Would that single poster of Jackson quantify to the level of political attack ads that we're seeing today?
In that, I guess I'll have to revert to my last point, and I can address that in my last point. Also, in finishing this off, the LBJ Jackson, the LBJ Daisy ad, in which is stipulated basically that if Barry Goldwater were to be elected, a nuclear holocaust would be brought on, in the very famous video clip where a little girl is eating ice cream innocently, and then you see a bomb exploding. Can be compared to the 2008 example of Mitt Romney's discourse on eliminating the Muslim Caliphate, in which he titled it, "The Axis of Evil Needed to Be Demolished." My next point is the negative campaigning is detrimental to the American political system because it's bipartisan, in which the Federalists and Democratic Republicans of the 1800 election were clashing, as well as currently the Democrats and Republicans are clashing very forcefully. Also, the negative discourse creates ad hominem attacks, which are not actually based on political theory or based on the quality and the goodness of their arguments, but based simply on the man and not the value of the policy. Thank you.
All right. On behalf of the Texas Zeta chapter of Pi Kappa Delta, I would like to thank all of you on the for watching this via the electronic recording. Thank you very much. And I'd also like to extend a thank you to all the members of Parliament here. Thank you for taking your time. Thank you, Madam Judge, for, of course, taking your time to time this and record everything. And I want to thank you, my partner, for helping me construct a great case. And thank you, the opposition, for providing us with an excellent clash. All right, so in this part of the debate, we're going to go over, first off, we're going to analyze some of what the opposition said, and we're going to look at how some of their claims don't necessarily hold up under scrutiny. And then I also want to go back to our own position, the government position, and I'd like to strengthen that and make some new assertions on our part. So first off, the opposition claims that, or it disagrees with the issue of accountability, our first contention, and that it causes negatives. I'd like to point out a little tidbit of information I have here. It's from a book, In Defense of Negativity. It says that attack ads in presidential campaigns. It's by John Gear, and it says it illustrates how negative ads manage to present significantly more factual information than positive ones. This is especially useful during a primary campaign when candidates have similar positions. So yes, you may get some negative information from negative campaign ads, but that doesn't mean that it's only going to be negative. There's going to be positive aspects from that, and you're going to extract some bit of truth from that, and you're going to walk away better than you would from a positively oriented debate. For example, positive campaigns are frequently issue-free and focused on just the sunny side of the candidate, and that's from CNN from January 19th. Sure, we could have an issue-free debate and everybody's lovey-dovey, but at the end of the day, it's not going to help us at all. All right. Second, they claim that it's still a group of silent people. That there's still a group of silent people who don't participate in the new age media, the new age of media. But these are people that don't have access to that media, or they don't have as good access to those resources, or they don't know how they can go by and reach them. They may not know where to get the information, or they may not know any better, for lack of a better word. The opposition also claims that what issues, or they're bringing into question the issues that were brought up in the presidential debates, and they did bring in some good questions to the debate. They talked mostly about the economy, Social Security, Medicare, and those are very good things to talk about. We need to talk about those things. Otherwise, why are we even here? You know, if we're not talking about the economy, the lifeblood of our nation, then what's the point? They also claim that mudslinging is hardly new, and I really did like the drawback to the Jefferson-Adams debate of the 19th century. I really like that debate. It was a half-breed of a squaw and a mulatto, and yeah, those kind of attacks were quite frequent, quite frequent back at the end of the day, but now you don't see that. It's more civil now. I'm not going to go and say that to anybody. Also, they claim that technology does not necessarily equal or correlate to uniqueness, and yes, it does. It definitely does. Back in the day, they didn't have the internet. The new age of media has allowed for it's allowed for ideas to travel more freely and more quickly. So if I want a piece of information, I can go find it. I can find it easier than, or more easily than if I had to wait for someone to come to me on horseback or something. And that what I just said doesn't necessarily mean that people know how to acquire the information, as I said earlier. It just means that the information is more available. Whether or not you acquire it is dependent on you. All right. I'd also like to go back to our plan. I wanted to bring up what my partner said again and say that media is inescapable. You're surrounded by it. You can't unless you go hiking in the Appalachians, you're not going to find yourself separated from information or from media. You'll have your cell phone or your computer, or there'll be a TV in the room. There's just too much. There's too many factors for media to be inescapable from you. And I'd like to point out that this campaign season is verily unique, because the mudslinging is certainly different from how it was back in the day, back in the 19th century at least. And if you couple that with new technology, you get a new age for politics, where the mudslinging has changed, and the availability of information to everybody and how that information is acquired changes. And this in itself sort of creates a melting pot whereby a new age of politics can be formed. And I just wanted to point out again how much our contentions that I want to point out that I have pointed out that accountability does still get brought into the debate because of as evident in the book that I cited, and that the opposition did see to us that negative campaign ads do create heated debates, and that I'd like to say that it also does get people interested. It gives a little spice to the debate, and that personality certainly plays a role, as with Newt Gingrich. And thank you.
The Texas Zeta chapter of Pi Kappa Delta welcomes the audience and viewers of today's debate here at Texas Christian University. I'd also like to thank the government for providing a great class, and I would like to thank my partner for helping me construct this debate. The opposition will begin by addressing the contentions of the government and then building upon our own case. The government stated that the political discourse in today's campaign season has created a sense of accountability for these candidates. Now, sure, it does show accountability. They are required to back up what they say, but that doesn't mean they're going to do it. Candidates are consistently going back on what they say and creating wishy-washy views on the important issues in the debates today. And this accountability just seems to make us more aware of the shortcomings of our presidential candidates, which seems to be detrimental to our political system instead of a positive effect. Next, the government states that it creates more heated debates. Debates are not meant to be soap operas. They're not TV show dramas. They're important issues that our country needs to focus on, and they should be addressed in such a way. They should be addressed in a serious and respectful way. They said that these heated debates create more interest in the political debates. But does interest equal intelligence on these hot issues? We do not want people interested in these debates that do not have the facts about what they are talking about. Sure, Twitter may be blowing up, but are these people on Twitter stating things that are going to be helpful to this debate? And if they are not, that also seems to be detrimental to the political system. Also, the government states that media is uniquely shapes this campaign season here in 2012. And they brought up the issues that technology was not around in the 19th century. But we don't need to go all the way back to the 19th century to compare this political season. We can go back to as far as 2008, 2004, 2000. We still have the technologies that we have today. And so these forms of media are not new. We still had these forms of technologies in previous political campaign seasons, making them not unique to today's campaign season, nor the ones of the 19th century, nor the ones of 2000, 2004, 2008, etc. Additionally, as the opposition, we would like to focus on the fact that the political discourse and the tone of political discourse in the current campaign season is detrimental to our political system. My partner talked about the 1800 election, and this was also the election in which the federal party fell apart. It was the demise of the Federalist Party. And that brings us to today, how we can relate this to the domination of the modern Democrat and Republican parties. We do not see the Libertarian parties or any other parties. We are completely bipartisan. For example, in last night's presidential debate, Gary Johnson, the Libertarian candidate who's on the ballot in 48 states, was not seen, and he will not be seen at any of the debates. I'll take it back.
Would you not say that bipartisanship in this country is a choice by the people?
It can be, but it seems to be controlling the people. The people do not control the parties are controlling the people. Additionally, this bipartisanship has completely closed a door on third-party politics. We are not seeing candidates other than Democrats or Republicans show their faces in this political campaign season. And that closes a door to many political views that are not being shown. Many ideas of the people are not being voiced because of this. And this is important to address because, as the question stated, lots of people are not having their views addressed. I'll take your question.
Would you infer that the Republican and Democratic candidates don't do a good job of encompassing everybody's values and issues?
That kind of brings me to my next point. It's very hard to please everyone, and the Democrats and the Republicans, the divide between the two parties is getting further and further apart. You either lean far left or you lean far right. There seems to be no in between, especially in this current campaign season, which is very destructive to our political system. The government also stated that today's debates are more civil than they used to be. But we would like to say that that is untrue. We still see ad hominem attacks, as my partner stated, on race, religion, culture, and a multitude of other personal aspects. We are no longer focusing on the issues. We are focusing on the people themselves. We're focusing on the people who are a part of the party we identify with, which also relates back to bipartisanship and how that is tearing this country apart. I will take your question.
Would you say that bipartisanship is unique to this election?
No, but it is being amplified by this election. And in conclusion, the opposition states that this tone of political discourse is detrimental to our political system, and the contentions of the government state that they are trying to form a positive outlook on this current campaign season. But I have shown, as well as my partner have shown, that these things actually create a more destructive side to our political system.
Thank you once again for witnessing this debate and being judged to the current situation in our country. I would like to first begin by just reiterating some of the facts that my partner has brought up from the opposition or from the government side, excuse me, and just state why we believe that this current campaign season and election is not unique, but in fact is detrimental. Okay, media is inescapable. There's nothing that we can do. Even unless you go out on the Appalachian Trail, most people can still get service. Trust me, I have friends that have done that. The fact is that we can't escape the constant feed of information that is getting streamed at us, whether it is factual or not, or infactual. The thing is that it's based on exactly what the government said regarding whether it's the people's right and people's initiative to seek out that information. We agree that is true, but it doesn't change the fact that this is detrimental. That the political flavor is detrimental because of its lack of policy and value regarding the issues that we face in this country. Mud is still being slung. The tool or the slingshot or even the physical arm has been replaced by a technological device. It's mechanical. It's something that we as the people do not, we set in motion, but we do not maintain it. It is put into effect, and it is something that revolves around this technology that we cannot escape. But it does not make it unique in the fact that sources of news have been a part of America since the beginning of our history. We have not had the amount per se of actual sources or of channels, but that does not change the fact that we still have had access, and that was based on our own initiative. Accountability, which the government stated was one of their contentions, is not something regarding the policy. It might be based on what they're wearing or what they're doing in their personal lives, which in my opinion is still a good thing, but it does not make it unique. Also, the heated debates that are brought on by these attacks, by these mudslinging techniques, do create heated debates, but they do not allow for political discourse to be changed in a positive way. In fact, it actually just makes it based simply on the personality of the slinger. Then I'd like to just go into a few of my thoughts regarding why we as opposition do not believe that this political season is unique in basing that on the history of this country, as well as considering how times have changed. Times have changed. We have technology. We have heated public displays of not affection, of the lack of affection towards political candidates. We have things that limit and also expand our ability to get our hands on news. On the news that whatever political pundit is pushing at us, whatever one of our neighbors puts on their Twitter feed, it is there. But interest regarding the debates, whether they're heated or passive, does not equal intelligence on the actual issues that we face as a country. The powerful and volatile mudslinging limits the scope and the depth of the American political discourse, which is not unique based on the history of this country, as well as it is detrimental to the political issues that we as a nation face. Thank you.
Once again, I'd like to thank the audience on behalf of the Texas Zeta chapter of Pi Kappa Delta for watching this debate, the opposition for creating a great clash in this debate, and my partner for helping me with this debate here at TCU. If we look back 4 years ago, we see a country that was kind of in a state of not knowing where it was going. We had a slew of presidential candidates on both sides, and neither of them really knew where they were going, I think. And if we look specifically at Mitt Romney, he ran, some would say, a poor campaign, and based it solely on what he'd done, and he didn't get very far. In fact, he didn't get past his own party. And if we look 4 years later, today, he not only has won his Republican nomination, but he's kept it very close with the incumbent, President Obama. And he's also run a lot more attack ads, and he's thrown a lot more mud in the process. Which brings us back to the resolution today, pointing fingers, calling names, and learning lessons. The tone of political discourse has uniquely shaped the current campaign season. And I think that example right there shows it all. It has uniquely shaped it. It has brought more people into the mix. And it has changed for a positive. And the government thinks that they won on 3 voting points today. Voting point number 1 is that more people are turning out in the polls. You see more people coming out to vote, more voices being heard in the crowd. You have blue states voting for Republican senators and House officials, and so it has positively affected it by getting more people off their couch and into the polls to voice their opinion on how their country's run. Voting point number 2 is that sunshine and lollipops don't really get us anywhere. And by that, I mean that running a passive, look at me, I'm so nice, campaign doesn't really bring to mind the important subjects that this country needs to be focusing on. You can see this in campus government. Campuses artificially control the campaigns. A lot of mudslinging and name-calling isn't allowed in these campaigns, and it presents kind of a transparent candidate. We don't know what the issues are. We don't know what their stances are, and so it becomes more of a prom king kind of campaign as opposed to someone who we want making decisions for us. And voting point number 3 is that it gets the more important issues out on the table. I think you've seen this in the other 2 voting points presented, but just reiterating, throwing accusations at one another, it gets a lot of issues out there on the table. It heats up things, and heated debates get more things on the table, more important things on the table, and people think more about these important things because if it's not on the table, people don't care. If the economy's not on the table, no one's going to look at it. If foreign policy's not on the table, no one's going to look at it. But this mudslinging and pointing fingers and calling names has created an enormous amount of clash in the candidates, gotten a lot of important topics out there on the table, and gotten their standpoint on these topics so that people are informed on how they're going to be running their country. So using these 3 voting points, the government feels that we've created a very strong case and that you should cast your ballot in favor of the government for the resolution pointing fingers, calling names, and learning lessons. The tone of political discourse has uniquely shaped the current campaign season in a positive aspect. Thank you.